Good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's me, Paddy from across the shuck, and you're very welcome back to the channel. And I'm going to have a wee discussion. We're going to have a wee discussion on Wharncliffe knives, but not just Wharncliffe knives, on old traditional patterns. And maybe more interesting to those who are just about. I have a very simple way of working out what something is. And like most things in my life, it is simple. There was a great tag went about, I think it was J.O. Adventures Outdoor started it. It was on show us your Wharncliffe blades. And he got an amazing response. An awful lot of people done videos on showing their Wharncliffes. And they come in all shapes, sizes, and it was fantastic. And there was some people like Rasputin Castle, who is one of my favourite channels, went into an explanation about Wharncliffes. No, what he said, look, whatever somebody says, it's their opinion, and it it's right because it's their opinion. But lots of people have opinions on knives. It's like any knives going back in time, they change, they adapt. There's wee bits come and go to them, but there's still initially that pattern is that pattern, and they should be recognizable as that pattern. So this, for example, this is a case swayback jack, and it's got a Wharncliffe blade. And it starts here because of the pattern shape, where it's upswept at the back and coming down to a thinner end here. You get a nice thin blade that's coming out. And the thing about this is, I was looking down, I thought I hadn't started the video, but I had. The thing about this is a Wharncliffe, and this is just a typical Wharncliffe pattern. You've a blade stock that's equal, and then it's taken away down and a gentle slope to a point on an always straight cutting edge. That's a basic Wharncliffe, and that shape and nearly every Wharncliffe. Although I have other options for this, but there's different shapes of Wharncliffe. Here's an older version. This is a modern case. Here's an older version, and you can see that Wharncliffe shape. Now, it's not as long and elongated as the case. You can see that. I'll put these up together. There you go. It's not as long. You know, it starts a bit later going down, but it is a gentle swoop down to a fat blade. So, or a flat blade. And that's what a Wharncliffe is. It's a gentle progression, it nearly starts, you know, from just as you get onto the blade itself, it nearly starts just gently heading down that way. And that, to me, that's a Wharncliffe. I mean, and it's, yes, there's couple of different shapes, and they start going down to that point at different times. I accept that. There's no problem. There is different ones. And to me, that is just part of traditional patterns. When you read books on traditional patterns, now this is what I find, and I'm by no means, I'm not somebody who gets really heavy into it. There's other channels out there like Rasputin Castle, who I absolutely adore because he does it. And you don't have to agree with everything anybody says. It doesn't make them a bad person. This is a hobby, and we're just sharing what we think. But I keep it really simple for me. And Wharncliffe, there's another modern Wharncliffe. Again, completely straight in the bottom. The thing about Wharncliffe's sheep foot, lamb's foot, they have a completely straight blade in the bottom. That is the most important part of it. Then you have how it slopes down, and that tells you exactly which pattern it is. This is, to me, obviously a Wharncliffe pattern because it's a gentle slope down to the point and a great detailed work. I mean, it's just a super knife. If you're going to do a lot of detailed work and even slicing cuts, it's good. You've got a long straight blade, so it's unlikely it's going to slip out of the cut. That's why I like a Wharncliffe blade. It's lovely. I don't have many of them anymore because a lot of the Wharncliffes now that come out are in swayback, different types of swayback jacks. I'm not keen on the swayback jack. I like this little small one. It's great because the shape of the handle doesn't really make much difference. I usually hold this in a pinch grip, or I'll have my finger up there if I want to do detailed work. You know, I'll use pinch there, and that's it. It's all right because it's small. But the larger ones, I'm not keen on. That's why I love this Rosecraft Blades one. It's more of a toothpick in the Vaha shape of the handle. It's beautiful. It curls in your hand, and you can cut. A swayback jack, in principle, is for doing pull cuts. You know, that's what it's meant to be doing, pulling away from the blade, pulling the blade into you. so that you've got nice control with your thumb, doing little cuts of your whittling or doing things like that. That's to me, this particular knife's version. It's a pull cut. I don't do a whole lot of them, but for whittling, this is perfect because it's just the right size for doing it and gives me lots. I can get right up to the end here and I can do little tiny nicks off the wood, chipping out the wood when I'm whittling. And much the same as this one. This is a pen knife. This has got a wee pen blade on the other side of it. Little small Wharncliffe on there. Perfect for whittling. And this is the serpentine shape, which I really do prefer. But there's not many companies doing just basic, either, a drop away hand. They're all doing this upturned one. I just don't find it comfortable for everyday EDC. If you're specifically going to do a lot of whittling, yeah, I can see the point of it. But other than that, for me, it's just not something that appeals to me in my hand. But it doesn't matter. But that basic shape is a long, drawn out swoop down. And I suppose to get to that original thing, it should be that long, drawn out. But they do shorten them and whatever. And a small blade, you don't have that. You can get away with it in a small blade. So that's my version of a Wharncliffe. But what I wanted to say is, I mean, all these, the Wharncliffe and the sheep's foot and the likes, and lamb's foot, ram's foot we have now, they're all a specific shape, and the foot ones are all for animals' feet. Starting with the lamb's foot one, which is just, you get the blade stock here and you have a full flat cutting surface, and then this drops from here immediately just in a straight line, and it carries on where the Wharncliffe will drop down about here. This will carry on, and you have a nice rounded end on it. Now that can be more stubby, but it is just that shape. It's the blade depth is decreasing as it gets down, because this was for getting into little lamb's hooves and cleaning them out, which farmers would have used. So it was meant as a purpose. This one has got a little upswept in it as well. And this is an older knife, a much older knife. But when you're doing that and working with that, you're doing that to get the stuff out of their foot. And that's why you have that upswept handle. And again, much like the Wharncliffe, this is built for purpose. This is not built to be cutting this way. It's not particularly comfortable to cut this way because, well, for me, it's not. I don't find it. I'd rather have either a straight blade, a bulbous blade, or a drop blade. That makes it comfortable for me. But it's a lamb's foot. A sheep's foot, again, very much the same. Starting off as the Wharncliffe did, you have a completely straight edge, and then this one, the blade comes out parallel. Rather than dropping down from the start like the lamb's foot, this comes out parallel, and then you have that more sudden drop off than a Wharncliffe. Just that's the difference. One tapers down narrow, this one stays parallel all the way and then drops down. That's a sheep's foot to me. And anything that looks like that, I'll call a sheep's foot. Do you know what I mean? It's dead simple. It's just, for me, it's dead simple. And that's the way I have to keep it. So I hope then we demonstrate you what it is. And the other thing that I wanted to say is, a lot of times, you go and you read books. I've got books there and I look through. I love looking through them. I'm a picture looker. But you'll get, and you'll see lots of knives. And depending on which book and which authors have got it, they'll pick their knives that they want to show in that book. And they can all be slightly different in the knives that they pick. But that basic shape is still there. They don't deviate from that basic shape. They keep the basic shape there because that is the shape of the knife. And don't forget, going back when these were made in the early 1800s and all, sometimes maybe before, there wasn't media. You didn't see it. I mean, most normal folks, a lot of the normal folks then didn't even read or write, but they still used a penknife. A farmer still used a penknife, but he never went to school at all back in them days. He just worked on the farm with his dad. So when they went and they said that they went to it was a blacksmith usually that would have made their knives, that have said, look, I want one with this shape for doing the hooves of my sheep. I want one this shape. That one's a bit too big. Can you make a smaller one to do the lambs? Hence the lamb's foot. And that's how they were made for purpose. And knives in the beginning, when they started getting more productive in knives and selling more knives, it was made for a purpose. So them shapes are perfectly, you can understand them shapes if you just keep it really simple, like I do. Just keep it really, really simple. So for me, that's the perfect rendition of a Wharncliffe blade, a nice long swooping blade coming down to the point. The sheep's foot, long parallel lines down to it's just a more sharper decline down to the point. And the lamb's foot was just, it narrowed all the way from the top to a perfectly flat edge. It narrows immediately, going right down to a narrower tip, and then the same sort of drop off as you would have on a sheep's foot, but it was just for a lamb. So I just thought I would like to put that out there. Yes, you can read books. Yes, there's lots of different books and you'll get lots of different information. But the basic nuts and bolts of traditional knives is they were made for a purpose. And if they look, and let's be honest, a knife maker can call a knife whatever he wants because he's made it. You know, a traditional knife maker makes the knife from tradition. So you try to keep as close to tradition as you like. And that's why we call it traditional knife made. But as time goes by, tradition gets adapted. I mean, here's for instance, this is a perfect example. Now, this is a replica of a knife. This is Mer and Grosh. When they first sold this knife back in the early part of the 19th century, or 20th century, I should say, in the 1900s, this was called, I don't know whether you'll see that on the blade there. The blade action's fading. As you sharpen and clean it, it does fade. But what it says on there is the Trapper. They called this the Trapper, May and Grosh. It cost $1.50 to buy when it came out, with a lovely bone handle, lovely shield, that Churchill pattern or equal end cigar pattern. But it's an equal end, to me, it's an equal end jackknife. But they called it the Trapper. I don't know why. It's a spear point and a pen blade. But they called it, and it was sold as that. So maybe, you know, back then, it really didn't matter what the blade was called, but they bought it for the shape and the purpose that they were buying the knives. It had to fulfill a function. Why this was a Trapper, I'll never know. I don't know whether there is an explanation of it, but it can be confusing when you come into the hobby and you hear everybody saying that this is, I don't think that is. But as long as you keep it basic, just that basic shape, it doesn't matter a jot. You're picking a knife for what work you want it to do. I mean, this lamb's foot will do every bit as good detailed work as will a sheep's foot and a Wharncliffe, because it's a blade or a handle, or a handle. The shape of the knife blade is a shape coming down to a point on a flat bed. That's it. All three of them are coming down to a point on a flat bed, and you get the ram's foot, which is just bigger. It starts here and it actually widens out to a sheep's foot blade. But they call it a ram's foot because it's bigger, and the rams would have been bigger. So there's usually a really simple explanation, and when you look at a blade, and once you've got a basic knowledge, you can pick what you want. I mean, the biggest change that you can see is like the reverse tanto. Everybody keeps calling the reverse tanto or a modified reverse tanto. And that could mean any shape, from banana shape to, it just seems they call everything modified. And the truth is they are. They're taken from a certain blade shape, and then people put one up, and then a knife designer wants his knife to look different. They make it a wee bit different. That's it. It's as simple as that. But if you take like that, the Benchmade 940 is the perfect and probably the first well-known reverse tanto. And then you get all the other shapes that go with it as time goes past. And that happens not as much with the older patterns like these. They stay basically the same. Maybe they're coming in at a wee bit of a different angle, but the final resting point is going to be a point that's on a flat bed, and it's just how you get there. So we give them names. Don't get too hung about names. Do not, because unless you want to study a pattern, that's absolutely fine, and go ahead. Again, I'll come back to him because he's one of my favourite. He enjoys going into that history of it, and he just goes into it in detail. I love watching that because I just haven't got the patience to do that. So this is by no means a slur, and I know he wouldn't take it as a slur, but this is not picking on somebody. It's just he's my friend on YouTube, and I watch a lot of his videos. But it was lovely to see all the Wharncliffes, and I love it that, you know, keep on going, boys. Put out different patterns. You pick a pattern, let other people put their patterns in, but maybe not be so set in your mind that, oh no, it's definitely not. If it's got that basic look, it was probably made back then by a designer who, and don't forget, somebody would have come to them and said, you wouldn't draw me one this shape, and he would have drawn it in a bit of paper in his workshop and said, I want one that shape. They call it the Warncliffe, you know, and he would have made it, and maybe he added a wee bit of a longer slope or a shorter slope because he wanted to stand out different. Even back then, they wanted to make their knives appealing to everybody or to more people. So they might have adapted it. They wouldn't have taken the whole shape of it out, but they've maybe adapted it slightly. I'm not sure if that made any sense or not. I have no idea, but I've waffled on for long enough. Thank you so much for listening. Yous are stars. Take care. Paddy's away for a wee cup of tea. Bye now.